Welcome in, listeners. This is Margin Mavens, a podcast hosted by Steph and Kayla, where we share our thoughts on all things literature. Today's episode is about Celestial Monsters by Aiden Thomas, the finale of the duology. Teo, Aurelio, and Nia are going to Los Restos in order to save the world, while the rest of the gold are being kept in specifically curated prisons. A lot is going on, the world will never be the same, but now make sure to grab a snack and a drink unless you're driving, and then remember 10 and 2, and come hang out with us while we dive in.
What'd
I
you
liked the
think?
first one better.
You did?
Yeah, I mean,
Why?
I think I'm just a big fan of arena settings.
No.
And so in the first one, getting the intrigue as to why are they being more aggressive than normal? They're in different trials and you got to see the different places and all of that was really fun. It was really good because you got to see a little bit of everything.
Right.
This book is told in dual POVs of Zio and Theo.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I didn't dislike the book by any means.
No.
I just think it's kind of like a divine rival situation.
Yeah.
Where the first book packed such
setup.
a punch. Yeah, the setup was really good. The world building was world building. I think that was really fun. So right off the bat, things I think get really dark and gnarly because once we get to
it picks up right where
once we get to Venganza Temple, you really see how deep Zio's betrayal goes. Because not only did he help the Obsidians come back, and that being always the plan, right? But he specifically curated these prisons for the rest of the golds, and they're gnarly. They are not just they're in solitary confinement and they can't talk to each other. They are specifically curated and based on their abilities, on their strengths, on their weaknesses. Right? I think the one that really hit the cruelest was Desi's.
Right.
Because Desi obviously is deaf. He is Amor's son.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so hits him straight to the point with one of the most painful things for him is not knowing where his loved ones are, if they're okay. So he's put in solitary confinement and there's layers to it, right? What I did enjoy though, and I think Aiden spoke about it. I think I read something recently on Instagram or something, but Aiden spoke out about how the prisons, or no, it probably wasn't an interview. It was probably in the author's note, but basically spoke out about how all of these prisons were obviously curated and they needed to be specific to the person, but he did not want any of it to fall on Desi being deaf. And I appreciated that because it was kind of like a twofold, right? So you had it to where he was not aware of his loved ones, right? It did kind of play on his deafness in terms of he couldn't see, so he couldn't lip read. He couldn't do anything like that. There's a scene that really was really sad, I think, when Xochi basically managed to grow a little sprout in his cell. Right. And Zio kind of has that moment of oh, that's what she was doing when she was tapping the wall or trying to do something. And it was just, his confinement really got me. Marino's also really got me because you kind of just saw his slow descent into death territory.
Yeah. Dehydration is no joke, y'all.
Yeah. He was slowly being dehydrated. Maybe through the course of this episode, we'll find out I actually did the second book more than the first book. Because now that I'm thinking about it.
It's a really interesting story because it's sort of like Theo and Zio are two sides of the same coin, right? They both just want, at the end of the day, they both just want to be loved and accepted for who they are by the people in their life. And yes, Zio went about it
terribly,
not the great way, but also Zio is 13.
Yeah, he's 13.
When have you ever known a 13-year-old to make good choices?
He's 13, and I really appreciated the conversations and the kind of where all of them except Stella and Ocello are very like, hey, Zio, like none of us were mean to you.
Right.
Like none of us went out of our way to like bully you or anything like that. Those two, we get it.
Right.
And the two of them are very much like, and I do it again, which understandable because they're, being held in a prison that he created. But the rest of them, especially, I forgot her name, Lightning Girl. She is very like, she's also Zio's age, and she's like, you don't think that like it also sucked for me. Like you're so caught up in
your own
thing, you didn't like catch on to other people. Which random tangent, but it really reminded me of that kid in Meet the Robinsons, the Disney movie where they go back in time or go into the future. Because you find out like the evil guy in that one was like, and I was all alone, I had no friends, and yada. And then you look into the flashback and he was so stuck in this idea that everybody hated him that he wasn't realizing the people around him were actively trying to talk to him and actually trying to like be his friend.
Right.
And so that reminded me a lot of that. Yeah, I think Zio's existential crisis throughout this book was really interesting to watch because he kind of has a point where he's like, hey, I kind of just wanted to be loved and accepted, and the Obsidians aren't really known for that. You get like Chupacabra, which really
it was really
creeped
funny.
me out.
She was really funny.
Yeah, she really creeped me out. And I know that this comes from like growing up very Mexican. Like even talking about her, my eyes are tearing up a little bit, and I wish I was being dramatic. She just really creeped me out. Like I was happy when she got defeated.
A+, Aiden. A+.
Owl Witch was also very creepy. Chaos wasn't as creepy to me because they were just kind of an enigma.
That's chaos, like in a nutshell, though. Like chaos don't make sense.
Yeah, but I meant like I didn't have like the bone chilling reaction.
That's fair.
To them as I did like Chupacabra, Owl Witch, and even like Venganza was scary, but he's scary in the way like psychopaths are, where he's like, I'm doing these terrible things. And no one can stop me. And we start getting a lot of kind of open world, a lot more world building happens in terms of Mala Suerte, right? So we find out that once we get there, because Nia, Aurelio, and Theo end up there because they're trying to figure out, like, hey, did you know Zio was this way, and what was the issue? What was the cause? What was the reason? They kind of start seeing that the entire city, right, has been basically built so that the humans are self-sufficient, that the people are self-sufficient. They are not waiting for Suerte to do everything. And you kind of see the big dichotomy between that and the other towns and the other cities, because the moment that anything sort of happens, they just kind of lock themselves in their houses and wait for the heroes to show up. It was really interesting to see kind of more of what Suerte was doing, and that he's not actually bad luck, and that's kind of something that was pushed on him. And so he created this kind of idea, right? And I mean, Theo's mom kind of alludes to it in the first book, where she's like, if you're told that you're bad long enough, you're going to come to believe it and stuff like that. And that kind of is big for Suerte throughout the entire thing. He reminded me a lot of, I mean, listen, I don't think it's a far reach to say that these books heavily reminded me or were very similar in essence to like Percy Jackson, right? Where you've got the gods, you've got the kids of the gods, you've got them kind of dealing with like, hey, you guys are making really bad decisions. Yeah. And so it's Percy Jackson adjacent if the gods were known by the humans and living in like states or countries or something like that. You know, it's the question of what would the Greek gods do or the Roman gods do if the humans were still aware of them, you know? It would not go well. So throughout the course of this book, Suerte really reminded me of Hermes and Luke. That whole thing of him going like, "Hey, please just help my son." You know, I still believe that he's a good guy. I still believe that he's just a lost little boy.
Yeah, he's
You
just
know,
hurt.
it hits better because of Zayo's age.
Right.
Luke still, I had sympathy for him and stuff, but Luke also was a bit older. I think he was 16 or 17, mayhaps. And not saying that everybody is smart at 16 or 17.
No,
But there
but
was
you
a lot,
know
yeah.
better.
There should be a little more semblance of accountability there.
Right.
The romance between Aurelio and Theo was so good.
It's so cute. They were
It
so
was
cute.
so cute
Your
because
Honor, I would die for them.
Aiden Thomas really does a great job at writing romance that doesn't feel forced. You watch it kind of blossom. You watch it grow from, you know, little things to now they're bantering and now they're, you know, sleeping next to each other and now they're doing all these things. And I love because obviously we get Theo's perspective that he's very aware and accepting of this sort of feeling, you know? And he's like, I don't actually know how Aurelio stands on this. You know, he's acting like he likes me, but what if it's just in my head? You know? And I think it's really cute and innocent. I liked it a lot. I liked Nia. I think we should really talk about Nia in this book because Nia's going through it. They're all going through it, but Nia is dealing with like a mixture of like survivor's guilt and also kind of she's not the eldest daughter, but there's a little bit of like eldest daughter-ness in her where she has basically created this idea with and without the help of Theo where he is just a jade and therefore she needs to always be the one protecting him.
Right.
And Zio's betrayal really threw her for a loop. Yeah, because not only did it anger her, that's kind of the first emotions we see from her when talking about Zio in the beginning of the book, and she's very much like, I want to throttle this kid. But then...
Yeah, that part was funny.
Yeah, but then with the like grabby hands...
Yeah.
Yeah. But there comes a really pivotal point where she and Theo are talking, and she's like, I really loved that kid.
Yeah.
You know, like... Zeo might have been acting, but they were not. And so they're dealing with the aftermath of being betrayed. And by that point, they don't know if they're going to be able to like get him to flip sides or if they're going to have to fight him. And she deals with a lot of like, I am not losing Theo in this, you know, like I am going to do anything possible to make sure that he's okay. And so
she really takes it to the extreme too. Like,
she really
to the
does.
point where she gets mad at him for putting himself in harm's way.
There's a lot of like trauma responses to the way that she's handling everything that they're going through, because despite the fact that they're on the same mission with the same level of danger, he is essentially like, she wants to put him in like bubble wrap, and that's just not realistic for the type of mission that they're on and the person that he is.
Right.
And they all got different objects from different dioses, and Aurelio's made me really sad.
Yeah.
Because Lumbra really just is not winning any Mother of the Year awards.
Does not care
His whole
for
shtick,
him at all.
Yeah, his whole shtick is that he is not flame resistant. He will get burned if he is not careful. And like his entire story throughout this one is also incredibly sad, because you see like Theo's constantly commenting on how he's hesitating, how he doesn't seem as sure-footed in his fights, and how it's really messing up, you know?
He's
And then
waiting for that
he's waiting
other
for Stella.
move for
He's
the other
waiting.
person, yeah.
He's waiting. He's always fought in a duo. And so Theo, I think, has that moment of like, oh, he's not mentally freaking out. He's just in that habit, in that it's
Yeah,
ingrained in him.
right.
And his mom gives him this circlet, basically being like, do whatever it takes to get Stella back, even if at the cost of like your well-being, at your, stuff like
Mhm,
that. And really kind of guides him to this idea that he needs to be the one to sacrifice himself.
mhm.
And he accepts it because he loves Stella. He wants her to be better. Right. And he kind of just accepts, like, my mom doesn't care about me. I think that's one of the main reasons I loved Theo and him getting closer throughout the course of this book is Theo having like the opposite experience of like, my mom wants me to save the world, but not at the expense of me,
Right.
and he's able to kind of talk to Aurelio and have them come to terms with the fact that like his mom sucks and he needs to not listen to his mom.
It's really I really enjoy the scene where Theo realizes, like, finds the dagger in Aurelio's pack and immediately is like, "Oh,
This is what
okay."
we're doing. Okay.
And
And
then
they go into
when
the
the
fight.
dangers pass,
Yeah.
he walks up and he's like, "Give me the dagger."
Yeah.
And you got the others who are like, "The fuck?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?" And then Aurelio just pulls it out, hands it over.
Yeah. I think their growth throughout the book is really fun. I think Theo being a lot more sure-footed in like growing the relationship and initiating that kiss and stuff like that is really cool because you get to see the counter side to Aurelio where he's meant to be, the Ciudad's hero. He's meant to be the
Mhm.
golden boy, right? But he's still just a boy and he
Yeah,
fumbles and he's worried he's a bad kisser and he's worried
it's adorable.
all of these things.
I like that, in the first book, Aurelio comes across very sure of himself, like he knows what he's doing,
Yeah.
whatever. And Theo doesn't know his elbow from his butt half the time, right? Like, and then in the second book, you actually realize, oh no, look, like Theo's really growing into himself and
Yeah.
believing in himself, especially when he starts getting control of his wings and he knows
Yeah.
like he can figure out how to use them in strategic manner. and
Mhm.
and you have Aurelio who is
Yeah.
not sure of himself at all.
Yeah, he's going through his own crisis. Yeah, I think the two boys really grow into themselves by the end, and I really enjoyed kind of seeing Aurelio have that moment of like, I don't need to be the hero. I could
Right.
just
He can just
bake
be.
or cook or,
Also
whatever
the
brings
fact that
him
he
joy.
bakes.
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
really cute.
cute. So cute.
Um so then going back into Obsidian territory, right? So going back into those curated prisons. What was really cool about it is the fact that Stella, through her own rage, like Zeo has a moment where he's like, she's gonna break free. Like, if any
Yeah,
of them here are able to break free just out of sheer force of
it's her.
will, it's going to be her. And obviously, I'm not saying that she would have been able to take on the gods herself because by that point she would have been tired and she would have been
No,
hungry
but she would
and
have tried.
she would have tried, and it
She would have
and it
tried.
and it would have 100% wrecked some plans. I think she would have gone out in like a big ball of fire and
Mhm.
made sure that the rest of her friends also were able to get out of their prisons.
Right.
She was so interesting, but she doesn't. I mean, it's the fault of the story, right? I don't think, like, the plot. I don't think she grows very much over the course of the two books, but I don't blame her for it because she's not really put in a position to grow.
I think she might grow maybe like a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like by the end of the first book, she believed that Theo
Mhm.
could save
And
them.
so maybe that's her, maybe, I mean, she is a Latina. Maybe that's her way of like showing love is just by being mean,
Could be.
you
Could
know?
also be because she doesn't know how to show love because clearly
Her mom
their
is not a good
mother
example. Yeah.
does not know how to show love.
Um, but yeah, there's not really any. moment at the end where she kind of like seems to take accountability, or like even a mention of like past behavior and what
Mhm.
kind of how that played a role in everything that was going on.
I kinda like that about her, though,
Mhm.
like, 'cause okay, we both raised eldest daughters in a Latino family, right? There's that expectation of us being sweet,
The bigger
sweet
person and
and helpful and kind and accepting when you're wrong and even accepting that you're right, but you have to say that you're wrong, like, because you can't be that way, like, you have to
mhm.
respect your elders, da 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 da. So, like, Aristella being like, "No, I'm not going to apologize for being who I am," is really, like, a great representation to me. Like, if I was reading this book when I was a teenager, I'd be like, "You know
Mhm.
what? I don't have to apologize for who I am. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not there's nothing wrong with me." Right? Like, and then, because as a teenager, when are you ever going to want to admit when you're wrong? Right? Like,
That's a good point.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I just thought it was nice. It's different.
So then throughout the course of the thing, right, we end up Zio has to make a choice and he
Mhm.
decides to help his friends, right? He has this
Mhm.
moment, which it wasn't abrupt, but it felt abrupt, if that makes sense. Like you kind of
Mhm.
saw him starting to question whether he was making the right choices. You start seeing him really start listening to what they're saying and how
Right.
things aren't going well, and then it's when he gets told that he's going to have to be the one to take out Theo and his friends that he, is like, no, I can't do it.
I think he came to that point, like, a while before that was actually,
Hmm.
like, put onto his plate, like, you need to prove yourself by getting rid of your friends. Like, I think he realized it, but he was just in that mindset of, like, delusion almost,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like, "Well, maybe if I'm if things will get better. Like, maybe things will get better.
Hmm.
Like, I just have to hold on and then everything will be better. Like, it'll feel better." And I think they realized real quick that it was not going to feel better.
Yeah. So then we get to that final like fight scene, right? And a couple things are really cool. Well, first and foremost, we get Theo and his like army of birds where they all
I
show
love it.
up
Yes.
and he's like, cool, we've got like dive bombers
Right.
for these gods. And I like that it's the only time he really uses his like lineage against the birds, because when it gets to the point where they're going to get in danger, he's like, y'all need to back up as
I'm gonna tell my mom on
yeah.
you.
And it's so cute because they immediately listen, right? And he really
Yeah.
has to like negotiate with them to back up. And then they're able to kind of subdue the gods. The dioses end up showing up. And like Lumbra in full fashion really shows up already on fire. Like she is
Yeah.
like 100% the moment I get in, I know that it's because the obsidians are here and I'm pissed. And
Right.
so all of the gods kind of do their own thing. I really enjoyed watching them reconnect with their kids, because that's the thing that I really appreciated of this series over Percy Jackson, is the fact that they
They admit
obviously
when they're wrong and they
yes.
try to make amends.
Yes, but also like in the finale of the original series of Percy Jackson, in the finale of Heroes of Olympus, right? We have scenes where the gods are fighting with their kids, but we never get a scene because the gods are obviously not as connected to their kids. So I
Mhm.
really enjoyed just seeing them reconnect and like hugging and
Yes.
genuinely showing care,
Showing
right? And
affection.
yeah, and that was really fun for me. We get Saul gets reanimated, which
Mhm.
dude is the final
Still
boss.
still required the fact that it still required a sacrifice
Yeah.
really, really chapped Theo's ass. He
Yeah.
was furious. He
He
was
was
so mad
like,
about it.
yo. I
All
really
of this to
appreciated
avoid a sacrifice, and it still needed to happen.
I liked Soul. I think he's a little messy, right? Because he's like, all right,
Very
we've been
messy.
doing this for centuries. I'm really tired of y'all just being okay with one of your kids dying
Yeah.
when like we could do this. You
Right.
know, like but he really is like the Obsidian's like final boss, right? Like they're like, oh, nothing can stop us. And the moment that Soul's back, they're like, oh no.
Yeah.
And he just waves his hand at them and they're dead. You know, they're gone back in the stars. We kind of have them all just like standing around each other going like, all right.
What now?
Aurelio wants to do the sacrifice. Stella says, no, it's going to be me. Zio goes, no, it's going to be me. You know, they're all, and Theo has a really fun moment where he's like, can we all stop trying to kill ourselves for 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was really good. And so then Suerte shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And he has this really sweet moment with Zio. And he's basically like, you have always been my son. You're always going to be my son.
Mm-hmm.
And he sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
Which, man, oh man, did that suck.
But it was also like from a parent perspective, like absolutely, without a doubt. Like, why are you going to watch these kids fight over who's going to sacrifice themselves when you can just make amends for all of the crap you've pulled and do it yourself? But also, like, what a really BS way to get out of, fixing things. Right? Like,
he's like, I'm gonna do this.
I'm not saying it was the coward's way, but I'm not
he's,
saying that.
He's like, there's a lot that we as gods need to address.
Right.
I'm gonna bounce.
Yeah, I'm not doing it, but y'all have fun with that.
But I also think it makes sense because he very much was like the least of the concerns. Like if there was another god that, like all of the Jade gods really were like, was it really my thing? The system was literally built to where we don't make a lot of those decisions. And Theo has that moment with his mom where he's like, you are also being sent away, but you did nothing. And she was like, well, I was there. I could have stopped something. I could have, argued it more and stuff. And that's kind of the whole, I think it's a good lesson for like life, especially with the state of the state of
country,
affairs and everything that's going on, right? Is those who are silent, those who are standing by, not pointing out the fact that it's not going in a good direction, right? Those who are still saying like, I don't get into politics, it's I'm not that interested in them or whatever, they're part of the problem.
Yeah, silence is complicity.
And I think that was a very big overarching lesson by the end of this book, especially with that conversation. And so the finale ends up being that the gods are going to go into their own realm. They are no longer going to live with the humans.
Yes.
And they will be back on their specific holidays. And I think there was another time. And then I think probably
once a year.
Yeah. And so they're still going to be able to see their kids once a year. And so for these kids, at least, they they knew their parents on a personal level. So it's incredibly difficult for them.
But they all sort of step up to the plate and they're like, yeah, you know what? Okay.
They all decide that they're going to start taking over their own cities and figuring out how is this board going to be created? How are the rules going to be regulated? How do we do all these things? And so that's really cool. Huemek is is a great father figure to Theo, right? And so we find out that Theo has basically become, big man on campus. And Huemek is like, hey, you were late for a meeting. And he was like, it won't happen again. He goes, 100% it will.
Yeah.
Go over to go see your boyfriend. He's been here for an hour. Go see
your boyfriend. Yeah.
And it's just a really cute scene. We find out a little bit of, every series I think does some sort of this is where they end up kind of thing. And so kind of tells us about what the other golds are doing, how they're still in
some
the
of
academy,
them are at the academy.
And some of them chose to not, and all of that. It doesn't really dive too deep into them, which I appreciated. It goes
it lets you sort of
be like, okay, this person is gonna go do this. There's kind of a hint that Nia is getting closer to Stella and Ocello. I don't know if it was a throuple situation.
I don't know. Nia dropped some lore in this book that I was like, "I can't with you. You're
My
messy,
headcanon
and I
is
love you."
it's a
It's
throuple
a throuple.
situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because obviously it would make sense. Yeah, I think I gave this book a 4.
I think I gave it like a 4.
I
Aiden
really
Thomas,
enjoyed
the
it.
writer you are.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think Aiden does a phenomenal job at throwing in really big life lessons
Lessons. Yep.
or problems into
Mhm.
like a fantasy world that still
Right.
makes it relatable. Because yes, there's gods and there's monsters and like all of these things. They have these supernatural elements to it, but the core of the problem isn't the gods or the monsters or the supernatural elements to it.
No, it's just the adults being adults
it's
and
just the
not
adults being adults.
considering the impact
It's
of their decisions and their
yeah.
words.
It's two boys falling in love
Yeah.
while the world is exploding, you know? And
Mhm.
like we can all relate to some semblance of that.
And the way that Aiden weaves in the culture, where even like someone like me who's not Mexican, like I'm Puerto Rican, you all know that I talk about it a lot, but like even I can appreciate and see just a little bit, like still relate enough where it just like hits on an emotional level.
Yeah. I appreciated it. I've got no
Yeah.
notes. This has been another episode of Margin Mavens. If you have not already, consider subscribing and following us on Instagram. There's some exciting stuff coming out in the next few weeks that we're super excited to share with you guys. If you haven't been told today, you are important and we love you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.